Hello YouTubers. In my private life, one objection I've commonly heard to post-tribulation rapture concerns the idea of mortals in the millennium. My view is that a failure to understand the demographics of the millennium shouldn't be a reason to reject plain scriptural teaching. And the scripture plainly teaches that the elect are gathered after the tribulation, not before. So if one rejects the plain scriptural teaching of a post-tribulation rapture, why even bring up the millennium in the first place? Why not reject the idea of a literal millennium? Just as dispensationalists have also rejected the scripture teaches a post-tribulation rapture. Their arguments show that they don't really have any logical standards, that they try and use the Bible to justify their views. At the same time, the Bible plainly teaches that the earth is repopulated in the millennium. It is a mistake for post-tribbers to ignore this. This video will contrast the premillennialism of Irenaeus with the amillennialism of Augustine, focused on the topic, who are the people that repopulate the earth in the millennium. Historically, something I find particularly interesting is that, apparently, the idea that we only receive spiritual blessings in the millennium originally came from certain Gnostics, probably the Marcionites. And as I've explained in another video, dispensational doctrine is actually similar to the Gnostic teachings of Marcion, because, much like Marcion, pre-tribbers are trying to escape Earth to get to some spiritual realm before the millennium, and because they deny any material blessings in the millennium. Let's look at what Irenaeus says about mortals in the millennium. He wrote about this topic in the 5th book of his volume, Against Heresies. The first point that should be made is that Irenaeus stated explicitly that we should not allegorize the prophecies. So to be clear, Irenaeus is saying that the prophecies refer to a literal millennium and what will happen during the millennium. After showing several verses that are inconsistent with either amillennialism or the views of the Marcionites, Irenaeus flat out states that the resurrection of the just, what many modern Christians would call the rapture, happens after the reign of the Antichrist. He states that the mortals who inhabit the millennium are Christians, either those who are resurrected or those who are translated at the end of the tribulation. He states, "For all these and other words were unquestionably spoken in reference to the resurrection of the just, which takes place after the coming of the Antichrist, and destruction of all nations under his rule, in the times of which the resurrection of the righteous shall reign in the earth, waxing stronger by the side of the Lord, and through him they shall become accustomed to partake in the glory of God the Father, and shall enjoy in the kingdom intercourse and communion with holy angels, and union with spiritual beings, and, with respect to those whom the Lord shall find in the flesh, awaiting him from heaven, and who have suffered tribulation, as well as escaped the hands of the wicked one." The point Irenaeus is making is very simple. Those who have been resurrected or translated are those who inhabit the millennium. He does not deny that there are spiritual blessings, including intercourse and communion with angels. He says that this applies to both those who are resurrected and those who survive the tribulation. But what's important is that he also made clear that there's another aspect of the millennium, and that is to repopulate the earth. He states, "For it is in reference to them that the prophet says, and those that are left shall multiply upon the earth." And Jeremiah the prophet has pointed out that as many believers as God has prepared for this purpose, to multiply those left upon the earth, should both be under the rule of the saints to minister this Jerusalem, and that his kingdom shall be in it. Irenaeus isn't saying that those who rule don't repopulate the earth. He's saying that we both rule and repopulate the earth. It's a false dichotomy to say that we can only rule and not repopulate. We rule the families we create because there is no longer enmity between man and woman. Some believe that this contradicts Jesus' statement that there is no marriage in heaven, but it doesn't. We're talking about Christ's earthly reign before the new heaven and earth. There is no marriage after the millennium, but it will be those who are resurrected that will also repopulate the earth. In fact, Augustine, himself being a premillennialist for most of his life, ended up rejecting premillennialism for this very reason. The idea that Christians repopulate the earth was somehow abhorrent to him. We know this because that's exactly what he wrote. He stated, "This opinion of a future literal millennium after the resurrection might be allowed if it proposed only spiritual delight unto the saints during this space, and we were once of the same opinion ourselves. But seeing the avouchers here have affirmed that the saints after this resurrection shall do nothing but revel in fleshly banquets, or the cheer shall exceed both modesty and measure, this is gross and fit for none but carnal men to believe. But that they are really and truly spiritual, do call those of this opinion Chiliasts." To be clear, my criticism isn't directed at amillennialism or Augustine. While I think premillennialism is what the Bible teaches, I recognize that plenty of true Christians are not of that persuasion. My criticism is directed at dispensational premillennialism because they will look for what they think are contradictions, yet completely fail to see or acknowledge the plethora of contradictions in their own doctrine. My view is that if you don't like the idea of Christians repopulating Earth, then why be premillennialist in the first place? After all, what is the purpose of the millennium but to restore the earth to the conditions that it was like in the Garden of Eden, where God said, "Be fruitful and multiply"? Well, that's all the time I have for today. If you like this video, please show your support by subscribing. Thanks for your time.